when you really understand that something that is a challenge that comes into your life is actually a gift, you just have to listen to where you're supposed to pivot, then it's a very empowering thing to then have challenges in your life.
Hello, Youest You Soul family. I am so grateful you're here for this conversation. I'm going to say to you now, you are going to want to be sure to listen to this entire conversation with my very dear and special friend, Danette Wolpert Holman, who is also the founder and the president of the Illuminate Film Festival. Because the story that is true, that has happened in her life that she's going to share is one of the most profound miracles I have ever encountered. And you know, we've had a lot of guests on this show talk about miracles and healing. So I'm not going to give it all away, but I wanted to let you know this is a very meaningful and personal conversation, both for Danette, for me, her being a dear friend, and now for you getting to be part of the miracle in her life. And hopefully you get to see what's possible, who you truly are. So with that, Danette, it is such an honor, my dear friend, to have you and to share your story, your gifts, and really to share your heart.
Well, thanks, Julie. I'm truly delighted to be with you today. And it's time. It's a sharing that I've been a little nervous about because it's such a personal story for me. But when magical synchronicities happened, and Julie calls me, and literally every single thing we talk about has a magical synchronicity, then I know it's time.
And I want to say to you, thank you for your courage. And I want to share with our beautiful listeners all over the world that we are so honored because Danette is debuting and sharing for the first time her very personal and vulnerable story. And I'm honored on behalf of our whole listener community around the world, really so grateful to be here with you and honor the courage. So I think what might be helpful, because just to give a little bit of context, you have this absolutely incredible film festival, the Illuminate Film Festival. It is the premier film festival that really the first of its kind to debut conscious cinema. Films like Heal, and you can share more. I know that your story, I know your story, but for those who don't, maybe just to kind of give us a little sense, like this was not the path. You did not think you were going to be starting a film festival after you graduated University of Virginia, where we met. That's not what you thought.
Most definitely not. I was in engineering school, I think, when we met, and then I transferred into business school and graduated and went and worked for Ernst and Young in this, IT and strategy consulting business. And if you would have asked the young 20-something Danette, what I would be doing later in life, I think the last thing I would have said was I am going to found a conscious film festival and pioneer a movement around conscious cinema. No, I was like, logic is king. Type A personality. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. So, yeah, very different path.
I think it's really important that you said that. And we'll come back to this. I know in part of your story, right? The logic, the science, like you literally, that's what you majored in. That's what you were focused on. So, okay, because clearly it looks very different today. You were in the corporate, the fast lane, you were moving up the ladder, you were doing really well. And I remember when at UVA, I remember you were like on it. Like you were on top of it. Okay. You had to go. You always have it going on, but I was like, this girl is going somewhere. I'm not sure where, but she's going somewhere big. She's going to make an impact. So maybe just share briefly, like what was the impetus, like what got you to totally shift gears out of, where you were to even getting into the world of film?
Well, I think it was the realization that our soul has a purpose, which, I really wasn't aware of, or I didn't stumble upon that notion until a little later, and then realized that I may not be living it. Even though I enjoyed my job, it was very stimulating for my brain. It occurred to me that if I really kind of took a look at my life when I'm 85 years old and look back and say, did I live my dream and did I live, the life I really wanted to live? I realized that I'd be asking a question that was more along the lines of, did I leave the planet better than I found it? And I realized that there was a whole soul's purpose in there that I was kind of ignoring in a way. Um, and so one day I saw a magazine open. I was at my client in Chicago, and there was a picture of a woman scaling a mountain with this deep crevice underneath her on this rope. And I remember thinking, wow, that woman is living her passion and her purpose. I mean, you don't do that unless you're really being called. And I was like, what am I really being called to do? And is it this work that I'm doing right now, doing business process re-engineering for Fortune 500 companies so that, they are more efficient? Not to put down, that work at all, because it's good and valuable work in the world, but it wasn't certainly my soul's calling. So I knew that I was going to have to take a leap. And I think I used to watch movies about people who took leaps, and I always used to think, is that going to be me someday? When is that going to be me? And so that I knew that, I needed to take a leap.
So you eventually left, and tell us about the leap into the world of film, and then eventually, of course, what, the absolute gift that you've created.
So there were actually two leaps, not one. It's not always linear, people. Um,
That's a good thing to mention. Yeah.
you know, the first one was, okay, I'm on this ladder. I'm climbing up the ladder. I'm like one of the first, consultants in my class to be promoted up this ladder. And I literally had to leave. I had to take a leap, um, to kind of just jump out of the entire field that I had prepared for from an education perspective. And, being this ambitious kid that was always like taking the next step to be at the place where society says you should be. And that was hard. But I also knew that if I stayed here, it'd be harder to leave later. So it was like, take the leap now. And I remember consulting my advisor, who was my uncle, and I said, well, you know, do I do I just kind of stay here and try and do some passion projects on the side, or do I leave and just dive right in? And he just said, you got to have the courage, Danette. You got to have the courage. Like, don't hold on to the safety because then there won't be enough room, right,
Mm.
for the dream. And so I took the leap. I gave myself a year to dabble in different fields with the objective of picking a new career path right at the end of it. And one of the three fields was film production. And I did many, shoots and projects, and chose film at the end of it because I truly felt that film was quite possibly the most incredible vehicle that we have at our disposal as humans to communicate experience without having to live it yourself. A film could not just inspire and educate and, change one's worldview. It could also enlighten. It could, you know, actually shift your consciousness. Um, it could change your trajectory. It could make you feel you're more capable of what you think you are, like really increase your own personal potential. It really just has like unlimited ability to make change in the world.
Okay, so I love this advice. The you got to just, and I think for anyone listening, this is where it gets really the rubber hits the road because it can feel obviously scary. Like you left for a year, that leaping, that courage, that just you got to leave room for your dream. I love that. And so I mean, you kind of did your own eat, love, pray experience for the
That was
year,
part of Leap
right?
Two. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so okay,
Leap Two.
so yeah.
So Leap Two was okay. I'd been in the film um, field for about 5 years now, primarily at festivals, because I really found that festivals, you could be at the intersection between the art, which is the film, and its audience, which is humanity, and you could actually experience what that intersection is for people. Are they crying? Are they laughing? Are they ahhing? Are they, feeling really moved to the point where it's going to create change? They're going to take action. Um, and that's where I really wanted to be. And so I was there. I worked for several festivals. I spent about it was more than 5 years because I ended up spending 5 years at the Miami International Film Festival as associate director. And near the end of that, I met a person who was living their life. She and I shared an office, who was living their life in a really special way, but I didn't understand it. I was like, you're living your life with some ingredient I don't have in my life. Can you tell me what it is? And she was like, no, you have to find out for yourself. And there were some really kind of interesting scenarios where she would just say before she ran off to the major theater where we were having like a huge premiere with like, you know, um, you know, mega stars, she would say, you know, I need a flashlight and a t-shirt. And I would go, why on earth would you need that? And then the funniest part about this story is that her answer was, I don't know. And I was like, this is weird, right? And I'm like, why on earth would you need it? I don't know. Okay, but she finds it anyway, and she takes it to the theater that night. And I asked her the next morning, well, did you need the flashlight and the t-shirt? And she proceeds to tell me something, right, that like has my mouth on the floor, which is that, she's leading whoever it was, it might have been Danny Glover. Anyway, the theater manager is leading Danny Glover to his seats because he came late, and the flashlight that they used to get him to his seats, like the batteries run out, right? And so um and then a volunteer who was working at the festival that night ripped their um shirt on one of the hallway sconces at this historic theater and didn't obviously want to be, walking around this very classy venue with this huge torn shirt. And I was like, what are you doing? And, in hindsight, I know that this is somebody who's listening to their intuition and someone who has, and what I believe intuition is sort of like an open channel to the divine. And because that divine is also in us, but we don't often listen to that quiet voice.
Mm.
And so she was listening to it, even though sometimes it was completely bizarre. And this was the gift, but she knew that there was no way she could give me intuition, right? That I had to go discover it for myself. So after 5 years as the Miami Film Festival, getting ahead of myself, as the Miami Film Festival associate director, I was where I wanted to be, right? I had worked myself into like the role that I really wanted at that festival. But that piece was missing, and so was my connection with the purpose of what I was doing. So I was closer because we did have some very inspiring films in the festival. We had some films that were really truly showing our potential, but we also had Cuban zombie movies, right? And so I realized that I wasn't quite there yet, and I left again, took the second leap, uh, left a dream job for the unknown. This time I didn't even have a plan. I had basically a year that I gave myself for like an eat, pray, love, although I didn't do a lot of eating, so it might be like, I don't know, seek, pray, love. Um, and it took me all over the world, and all over South America and South Africa and actually all across the United States. And I landed in Sedona because my intuition told me to be here. And about a year after I landed here, I got a download, right? During a ceremonial meditation that I was doing with a shaman per se. And I had this vision. And the vision was this whole team. I was leading this whole team of people to produce something that was also going to be life-changing for the people that attend. But what was really also special about it is that the group of people that were producing it, we were all in our own conscious evolutionary process together, and we were supporting each other's growth, into the highest version of ourselves. And so I had that vision, and before long, that vision was called ILLUMINATE Film Festival, and it was a fusion of my heart's calling, and the skill sets that I have, and the things that I love to do. And so I found 9 people who had never been at a film festival before. Oh no, one of them had. And I taught them 9 different jobs, whether it's the program curator, or it's the guest liaison, or it's the marketing person. And 9 of us manifested our very first Illuminate Film Festival in 9 months. And this was a festival that, honestly, come on, folks, right? It was about mind, body, and spirit. At this time in 2013, when we started to meet, there were only 2 films that had really kind of made it, right? What the Bleep Do We Know and The Secret. And, dozens, if not hundreds of filmmakers tried that formula again, and it didn't work. And so the industry was like, those are just outliers. This stuff is way too woo, to make it to a theater. And, so I was like, well, this could fly or flop, really, is the world ready? But one thing I realized, is that this all came together completely out of higher self. You can't do a seek, pray, love for a year and not be listening and being guided. And so even though we had 9 people who'd never been to a film festival, we literally had borderline $900, right? We were willing to take the risk for a vision that was bigger than us. And what we did was, set some goals. We thought, hey, if we could, fill 500 seats, we know we've got something. If we could get at least 5 people to attend from over Arizona state lines, we've got something. If we could get a world premiere by year 4, we've got something. And in 9 months, we didn't get 500 people in seats, but we got 2,700. With our literally less than $1,000 marketing budget, we didn't just get 5 people to attend from over Arizona state lines. We got people from 27 different countries, 27 different cities, and 11 countries. And then we didn't just, pull in a world premiere, which is the first time first time a public audience has ever seen anything, which festivals compete for. we didn't just get a world premiere in year 4, but we got 4 world premieres in year 1. One of them being Death Makes Life Possible, which was a film executive produced by uh, Dr. Deepak Chopra and Dr. Marilyn Schlitz, both of whom came to the festival for the program. And this was magic. This was magic. And then we knew not only do we have something, but we knew that the universe was totally in alignment with what we were doing. And that as long as we were co-creating with the universe, that it's quite possible that the outcomes would be more than we could ever dream of manifesting on our own.
It is so stunning and listening. And I know, this is just, okay, so friends, there's more and more that unfolds here. And I want to say what is so beautiful, it's like it's got the divine thumbprint all over this, right? And you allowing the seek, love, and pray, right? Like you started with that, I'm gonna trust and I'm gonna leap. You talked about it, 2 different leaps, right? So leaping from corporate America to the film festival world, and then leaping again. And it almost felt like, a bit of that hero's journey, right? Like the seeking, the looking, like where is this thing that this person had in the film festival, and realizing it reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. It's been within you, it's within us the whole time. And you use that to trust. You trusted, okay, I'm going to move to Sedona. Okay, I got, you got this download. And to me, this is like everyone tuning in, this is how the divine works, right? We have to do our part, which takes faith and can be scary because you didn't know this was going to happen. You wanted 500 people. I mean, I ended up starting to come and be part of this a couple years later when it was like, you were already well into it. But I think this is so important because you didn't know that was going to happen, but you use the word co-create. And it just has the divine, to me, the thumbprint, the signature all over it, Danette, all over it. So beautiful. So for those who don't know, this film festival, and maybe just to give like a quick sampling, I mean, this, I've been so grateful to be involved, I think since 2016, maybe, when I reconnected with you. I was like, what is this? I mean, my heart, I didn't even have any reason. It was the same kind of like, I don't know why I'm going, but I must be involved with this. Remember, I'm like,
Yes.
you put me wherever you need me. I didn't even know how to use social media at the time. I think you had me do whatever I was doing. I was like, I will do whatever you need. This is where I remember I got to meet Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and Kelly Noonan Gores of Heal, and Dr. Michael Beckwith. And I was like, my God, these human beings were all in the human family, but are just really living, their soul's purpose. So you saw something was there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many um people out there, right? Like the Joe Dispenzas, the Greg Bradens, the Lynn McTaggarts, the, Michael Beckwiths, even the Tony Robbins and the whole human potential movement. Like, um, they really are providing a service, right? So that we could really truly understand ourselves and our true nature. But how amazing is the power of a film that doesn't depend on that physical person being there? It can convey not only the wisdom of those folks, but can also convey characters who are embodying that and what their journey is. So film is the absolute kind of most valuable to me, most valuable medium to inspire transformation. And so over the years, we curated such an incredible variety of films, from films like Awake, the Life of Yogananda, which is, about how an East Indian mystic came over to the West and then all of a sudden, kind of introduced this whole world of yoga. um, and Eastern philosophy to the United States. Which, by the way, that film I think was released in like 90 countries and theatrically all over the United States. Um, we've shown films like Song of the New Earth, which is it's all about sound healing, and it actually has introduced sound healing to the masses because actually there's sound healing in the film. So if you've actually gone to
Yes,
sit in the theater, you felt vibrations that kind of made you feel very different when you walk out of the theater.
very
Um,
different.
very different. I mean, in some cases we've had people absolutely in like this huge release, tears all over, because they're like feeling something, within, that's so incredibly moving. Films like Emotion that's a big hit on Gaia. They describe all the subjects in that film describe kind of, our emotions and our mind body connection, which is also talked about quite a bit in Heal. Um, and, Heal really opens people up to what's possible with the mind body connection and how we can truly heal ourselves, which is one of the films that really, really influenced me when I ran into some pretty tough circumstances. So, at the festival, we not only give people, the chance to interact with this, paradigm shifting, transformative content, but we also help these filmmakers because we have to discover these films and then we curate them. We pick them out of like a haystack a lot of the times, and then we help them find, distribution. It could be in theaters all over the country. It could be on streaming platforms. It could be, at other festivals. But in a lot of cases, these films wouldn't even be out there if we didn't find them.
It's so powerful. It's truly what you're doing. It's illuminating the world and it's illuminating our minds. And as you said, film being the vehicle for miracles, which we're going to talk about. So, and I want to let everyone know, we'll have in the show notes, the description, because the Illuminate Film Festival 2025, which you will be at, I will be at. There's going to be so many amazing people. Some of our guests that have been on here, Suzanne Giesman, right?
Mhm.
Matt
Matt and Joy
Kahn,
Kahn,
Matt and Joey Kahn,
Lynn
Lynn Twist,
Twist.
who was just here. So, we'll have all that information. May 1st to the 5th is the live version, and then you have the virtual. Everything will be listed. But I want to shift for a minute. You've talked a lot about the power of film, and it's the ability to shift to transform your mind, your consciousness, your ability to heal, to understand what's even possible. So, Danette, I think what would be helpful is to share a little bit how these films have actually helped you in your own journey. And let's start moving into that because I know that's where we get into a very, very vulnerable and very powerful story. Take a breath.
Yes. Let me just start out by being super transparent, which is that, um, on one occasion, I've publicly shared half of this story, which is, my own personal health and healing journey. But I have never shared the second half of this story, which is my husband's health and healing journey that, is just about a year old, so pretty fresh. And I think I was resistant to sharing this story. I think maybe because not only did it feel really sacred to me, and also I would always burst out in tears, just thinking about it, but also because I wanted to like get clear on why I would even share it. Um, because I didn't want it to be because like I wanted to be the couple that healed, you know? Or I didn't want it to be because I would get any sense of validation out of it. I had to get really clear on why I would want to share this. And it has really, truly been this incredible process, actually, since Julie asked me to come on to the podcast, of like just getting quiet and intuiting my why. Um, and then magical things started happening. And I started realizing that this story, my story, which is a story about how stories have led me to a deeper and greater understanding of who I am, um, and really profoundly accelerated my own spiritual awakening and also my husband's, and has led us through this journey where we've experienced two life-saving miracles. And that sharing that story can help other people learn and discover who they truly are as spiritual beings in a human experience, and learn what is actually and or what may be possible when we truly know who we are. And when I say know who we are, I mean that we are divine. We are of a divine essence, and that we are love. That not only do we come from love, but that is absolutely and 100% who we are. And through this whole experience, I actually came to have an otherworldly experience that led me to kind of the knowing of that, rather than just me intellectually understanding from books and, from other um, people's accounts, that, yeah, that we are love.
So, and I think it's quite appropriate that the theme of the film festival this year is looking through the lens of love. And what we're talking about is literally this miraculous story of both of your healings, looking through the lens of love, Danette. And, you know, for those of us, especially in the Western world, that get so into reading and trying to understand this concept, what I really feel you're saying is this is about experiencing it at a level that has nothing to do with the brain, which is interesting. It has everything to, right, because that has meaning as well. But knowing this, feeling it, and obviously having this profound shift. So maybe let's start with your diagnosis. What happened to you first, and then go from there.
So in 2018, we started a diagnosis process in 2017, but it took a year to get to a diagnosis, which was I was diagnosed with a pituitary tumor, which is a brain tumor that is really squarely right in sort of like the middle of your brain. And from a very, very rare disease that was like 1 in a million people are diagnosed with in a year, which is like 0.0001%. Okay. And so that was obviously a huge, huge blow. And I came to understand, that there is a need for both conventional medicine and alternative modalities and healing. And I pretty much took on this tumor with everything that I had, the most important part to me being the intuitive process of going within and asking why this tumor even was here. Because I really believe everything happens for a reason. And when you really understand that something that is a challenge that comes into your life is actually a gift, you just have to listen to where you're supposed to pivot. Then it's a very empowering thing to then have challenges in your life. And so, oh, and by the way, I learned that lesson because I watched a film about that. And then I, went into a deep intuitive process with, a medical medium who was helping me to really understand like what I needed to learn and what I needed to release in order for this tumor to decide it was going to hit the road. And I did a lot of different modalities as well. I worked a lot on my nutrition. I worked a lot um on my energy body. Um and I really created this path of healing for myself, with you know with no guarantee obviously that I would be able to completely heal this, but I did. Um There was a moment, I did have brain surgery, and there was a moment after brain surgery where it became clear that you know, the surgeons felt that the surgery had failed. And in that moment, I had to do one thing. And that one thing was what I realized over a year of all of this internal work is the reason for this tumor. It was the need to surrender. And this is often a lesson given to really type A personalities who, like to set up life in a way that is going to guarantee success. And, I had a tendency to do that um, in all areas of my life so that I could guarantee progress, guarantee success. And, sometimes that was extremely difficult and I would sacrifice my own health for it. And it became really clear that that tumor came to teach me surrender. And in that moment when the surgeon left the room and I had the understanding that that surgery had failed, I had to go into the deepest meditation of my life and surrender. Meaning, I had to surrender all of my dreams. I had to surrender even living perhaps more than 10 more years. I had to surrender working. I had to surrender being able to climb upstairs. I had to surrender at the deepest level I have ever surrendered. And I came out of that 4-hour meditation in complete peace because then I knew, well, I guess the universe, divine, feels that this is the highest road for me. And maybe it's because I'm going to help other people who might have the same condition, or like teach them how to come to peace with it. And maybe that's the reason. And maybe that's my greatest service on the planet. And I let go. And what was really kind of insane is that, they tested, to determine whether the surgery is successful, you have to have certain um, hormone tests, and those numbers have to like drop significantly within 48 hours of the surgery. And mine, before this meditation, had actually increased to levels that were kind of unseen before, meaning maybe the surgery wasn't a failure, but it was like an epic failure. And then when I emerged from this meditation of surrender, those numbers crashed. And I have looked and researched for any other instance, any other report in any medical journal of that happening, and I have not found one.
Wow.
And so, I know that maybe out there could be a scientific and medical explanation for this, but I haven't found it. And I truly believe that there was some real, there were other forces at play here, and that this was indeed a miracle.
I am just pausing. I mean, that, it's interesting as a dear friend observing on the sidelines and to hear it now and to share this and for our listeners to really get the power, the impact of surrender, of what I'm hearing, Danette, and so many of us are type A. You might have been type A plus, but most of us type A somewhere, and this, it's what's so powerful to me because I remember, and you've mentioned this, the power of your films that you brought that was co-created with the divine aided you in your healing to even know to seek these healers, to do these meditations. And then it's like what you were seeking, right? This ability to find peace no matter what, and to see your body react like that. So to share for everyone, it ended up being, you can share the rest, that the hormones dropped. It was miraculous, absolutely miraculous.
Yeah. So, the surgeons, you know, 6 weeks after the fact, checked in, right? And went for a follow-up, and they were stunned that I was actually healed. And that I continued to show absolutely normal test results for the last, 6 years. And, you know, they're not really sure how that happened. And they cannot confirm with any kind of medical certainty how that happened, but they just say, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Um, and so, as I reflect on, how did I know to, to do, to take this healing path? And quite honestly, it was all the films that I had been curating for 5 years. It was the films about the mind body connection. It was films about the idea of energy work. It was about the idea of like trusting your intuition. It was about the idea of going within. It was about of understanding everything happens for a reason. It was information about all these various modalities. It was information about nutrition. It was information about, like, how food is medicine. I mean, it was really all of the above. And so at the end of this, I thought it was quite ironic that, um, my soul's calling, which was to elevate consciousness through film and storytelling, is not just the thing that helped this whole world of Illuminate audience members, right, to find more of themselves, to be healthy, to heal. It wasn't just for them, but it was also for me.
Yeah, that is just, it's exquisite in a way. When you were saying there's something else, the divine, the higher love, the ability of this all loving divine force. And that I just come back to the word you said, co-creation. This was co-created, and to think you didn't even know when this was created, and that download came, that it would actually be here to heal your own life. So powerful.
And
So
help me to
yeah,
understand my own power, because, and I don't mean power, right, in the mighty sense. I mean power, my inner power.
yeah,
And that, like, my power is not just what we can see and feel. Like, there's intangible components of that power. that can be incredibly, incredibly life-changing or life-saving.
Yeah. So fast forward, and this is the part I know that you have not shared before. And I just want to say to you and to all of our listeners, this is such an honor to be here because it really amplifies the miracles that are possible for anybody and who the divine really is and who we are. So I will let you share the story, the part two to this.
So this one is about my husband. So it actually is more emotional for me than the than sharing my own account. But essentially, 5 years later, um, my husband was helicoptered to a hospital with the potential diagnosis of glioblastoma, which is the most aggressive and deadliest form of brain cancer. They found a tumor and didn't tell us quite yet, but we found out within days that there is actually no cure for this kind of brain tumor, and that the life expectancy, once discovered, is anywhere from 12 to 16 months. And it just felt unreal because, I sat at his bedside when they diagnosed that and thought, wait, this can't be happening. I'm the one, right, who had the brain tumor. Like, he was the one who stood by me through that. Like, this doesn't make sense, right? He's the uber healthy one. And this, was a very, very, very intense journey. He is like an extremely strong person. He is my rock. He is the rock for our family. Um, I had never seen him cry until that day, really. And, excuse me. And it was the first time I'd actually ever seen him at that kind of ultra vulnerable state, um, where he was just saying, this just can't be it. And at his bedside, the day they told us, what they are assuming it is, and let me just be clear that with brain surgeries of this kind, his brain tumor was near the brain stem. So they can't just go in and do a biopsy and figure out what it is, because it's so deep in the brain that you don't actually want to go in there more than once. Because anytime you go that deep in the brain, anything you touch in there with a scalpel or whatever, you know, tool they're using can cause immense brain damage. So you don't really know exactly what the diagnosis is until they take it out and they send it to pathology, and the pathologists dissect it and say, here, this is what it is. But they can deduct from all of the various tools and how the tumor behaves in the MRI with contrast, and it's brightens on the outside and it's dark on the inside if it's blah blah blah. Anyway, you get the drift. And so they were 99% sure this was a glioblastoma, and they even entered him into a clinical trial for glioblastomas, which obviously confirms their level of certainty um, was 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 pretty high. And we proceeded to, as I'm sitting at his bedside, to get quiet again and hear our kind of divine quiet voice say, this is not it. And not only, you know, not only do we have these medical tools of, surgery and all these things that are, you know, wonderful, gifts of medicine, but we also have our energy body, and we also have the loving support, prayer, and healing energy from an unlimited number of people, friends, family, like lots of healers, lots of practitioners, lots of Reiki masters, lots of spiritual teachers, lots of, lots of powerful people out there. And so, this is a very long story, and I'm going to shorten this by saying, you know, the combination of the knowledge that my husband gained from actually the movie Source, which is Joe Dispenza's latest documentary. I showed him that in the hospital just a couple days before his surgery. And that's where he truly learned like what the potential of the mind body connection is, because in this film, um, some medical doctors had confirmed, right, what remote energy healing, how it affected cancer cells. And even the surgeons were wildly surprised. And so he's a science guy, right? Drew is he understands everything through the lens of science. And so that clicked for him. That clicked for him as like what is actually possible. So that combined with the fact that I sat at his bedside and I said, "Hey, 5 years ago, by the way, to the day, 5 years to the day, we were in the same ICU of the same hospital, on the same floor." And I said, "Look, I was here exactly 5 years ago. And if you would have asked the surgeons then, based on all the conditions and what I had experienced, what the chances are that I would be perfectly healed without any additional treatments, they would have said less than 1%. I mean, way less, like probably 0.001% again. I said, so if I'm going to be the less than 1% miracle, or if I was the less than 1% miracle, then so can you. And that also opened up his realm of possibility, and his whole disposition changed. From that moment forward, he was in divine flow. And I said, there's one thing that I'm going to ask you to do, and that is to receive. Because he was not good at that. He was such a giver. He was really comfortable in giving. But not only did he have to receive from me, but he had to receive all of the energy that was going to be coming in from this, I mean, this huge kind of circle of people whom I had tapped to do the visualizations of this tumor just sort of losing its steam and collapsing and kind of being eaten up by all the good positive cells in his brain. He had to accept that, and then he had to accept whatever was coming through, you know, from the greater universe. Whether you believe that that's a like a phenomenon of quantum science, or whether it's, divine source from, as referenced in, you know, spiritual and religious traditions, it's the same thing. But he had to let all of that in. And what's so crazy to me is that he felt all of that and saw all of that energy. Okay, that's an experience I have personally never had. I have never seen swirling, colorful energy, right, at near the ceiling of a hospital room, right? That was his experience though. And he said at first he pushed it off because it was scary, and then he decided, right, based on his promise to me, that he was going to let it in. Um, and he had some very, very intense experiences in that hospital. But and that would take a book, basically. to explain those, but one after the other actually blew me away. And I actually thought after days in that hospital, and how he was referencing them and processing them and, how open that channel was and what he was experiencing blew me away to the point where I was like, did I marry like Yoda and I didn't know it? Because this man had totally turned into this wise man. And here I'm the person, right, that has like, that goes to all the retreats and does all the spiritual practices and does my meditation and my Reiki and my audio, walking meditations. He doesn't do any of that. He would never classify himself, or would have never, as a spiritual person. Um, and yet he was having this awakening. And I joked, I joked, I'm like, well, here I thought I'd be your teacher, but you're mine. Because boy, he really tapped in and tuned in a way I've never personally witnessed. And the great news is that after 6 weeks, we found out that that tumor was a benign grade 1 brain tumor, and that the cure for that brain tumor was to take it out, which obviously had already happened. And that these surgeons, who were top surgeons, best in the Southwest, said that they had actually never seen this before. And I actually went to go look at the statistics. And okay, the probability of my husband being diagnosed with this very rare grade 1 benign tumor was 5 per million.
Well,
And we actually were thinking, wow, these surgeons have never seen this before, because that would only happen once in 17 years. One person would be diagnosed with this benign tumor. And so in general, if you're a surgeon for, 30 years, you will have never seen it, other than this particular case. So we realized what kind of odds he beat. And the surgeons even said, we've been working, we do 12 or 1400 major brain surgeries a year, and we've never seen this. And might I add, there were only 2 hospitals in the entire region that would even do the kind of brain surgery that he had, because it was so complicated and so difficult, and it was so near all of the absolutely critical functions of the brain that most surgeons just will refuse to do this. And most of these surgeries also end up in major paralysis, or an which would be just the left side, total paralysis, inability to walk, inability to, basically to function without electronic wheelchair kind of thing. It usually resulted in something like loss of sight, or loss of ability to swallow, or this whole laundry list of things. And of course, we saw a number of those folks at the at the center afterwards, right? That is for therapy, right, to gain function back. And he had to do that for several weeks. But we saw everybody else who had similar brain surgeries, and we just kept feeling like, how do we deserve this miracle? If you looked at him, he looked the absolute same. I mean, it was a long road of recovery to, there were things affected. His vision was affected, right? His processing brain speeds, his ability to drive, like those things very, very, very slowly came back, and we weren't quite sure if they would come back at all. And the doctors couldn't say either. But even with all of those circumstances, we just we just felt like we were blessed beyond. Um, and so we look back and we start thinking about the how. How did this happen? And you could hear, I'm telling you the what, right? Those are the facts. That's exactly what we experienced. And there was an experience in there I haven't talked about yet, which I'll get back to. But this is the what. I could tell you the what. Can I tell you that the how? Like, how did he also get this less than 1% miracle? Um, I could tell you what I think it might be. I could tell you what it felt like it was. It felt like these divine universal forces at play that we could co-create with, my husband Drew could integrate and use and apply within himself, and also the absolute divine energy that came from the thousands of people. I tapped every favor I've ever asked of any Illuminate guest, any spiritual teacher. I mean, we had literally Amma in India looking at his picture and, visualizing the dissolution of this tumor altogether. So much of that profound, profound, loving, healing energy coming in, I think, had to have something to do with this outcome, because the odds are near zero. And so I really, really feel like this is a sort of a path that has opened, which has made me want to dive into this how, right? Like, how? And I want to do the research, and I want to find, other stories and accounts, and I want to, you know, I want to get the external world's view on this, and then, we want to integrate that with really, truly, what is our intuitive knowing about this experience.
So, what a profound, life changing, there's almost no words, Danette, to sum up what, even the idea that this happened 5 years to the day, which by the way was, I believe, your birthday, both
It,
of the days. I remember that because yeah, I just remember that. I am curious, and I think it's important to share this. I know when we were talking about it, the spiritual experience that you both had in that hospital room. And if you're comfortable sharing that and what you know now that you didn't know then. What do you know now after that experience?
so I had in that hotel room. I wish it was a hotel room. It was a hospital room. I had in that hospital room the most profound spiritual experience of my life. And it's hard to explain, um, because I feel like there's actually no words for it. But it was absolutely this feeling of being together, Drew and I together, being bathed in this golden, glowing light together, connected by the profound love that we have for each other, and that was coming in and holding and supporting us. But what's interesting is that we were not existing with the love, we were the love. And in this paradigm, like, actually nothing existed but love. And it was really surreal because here we were in the hospital still thinking he had a year to live, or at least the doctors telling us he had a year to live. And we were in this absolute state of otherworldly, peaceful, loving bliss. And it would like be catalyzed by us just looking at each other. And it was also interesting that there were other people in the room, right? Like our parents were in the room, doctors would come in the room, and nobody would have kind of a clue as to kind of what we were experiencing. And we were just in it. And it was honestly a feeling of this is who we really are. Just this unconditional love beyond human understanding. And we just felt so lucky. And on top of that, we felt like it didn't even matter what happened, like on in this living reality. It didn't matter if he got sick and left this planet. It didn't matter that he would be in another realm and I'd still be in this one, because this love was transcendent and it transcended all of that. And that the other feeling that I had was, this is, I think, what I came to the planet to understand. And that no matter what even happens for the remainder of my living years on this planet, it's just gravy, because experiencing this must be why I'm even here. To know myself, to know ourselves, to know our true nature, to know the nature of reality itself, right? That we come from love, we are love, we are returning to love. And then if I even look at the right, this tangible reality that we have here on earth, that my purpose is also to be love so others can not only feel it but be in their love, to have people access the divine in a way that where they could come to understand who they truly are. That's all a part of my work. That's all a part of Illuminate. That's why I do that. That's why the team does that. It just all felt like part of this mandala of creating love in the world and accessing it, because it's just who we truly are.
Wow. Wow. So it's just profound. It's there, the golden thread of the divine in all of this, from the seeking to the intuitive nudge to start a film festival, to it hitting the ground running with a budget under 1,000. I mean, all of these little synchronicities and spiritual breadcrumbs. It's like it just this golden thread. I'm just seeing this golden thread, Danette, of complete divine guidance and love. And this story, it needs to be told here. That's why we're doing this. In your book, which is coming at some point, in your film, which is coming. I'm just saying, I'm an intuitive. I see it. It's all there. And thank you, thank you for the courage, the faith, the surrender to follow your intuition, to be in flow, and to allow for this almost 0% chance of not one but two miracles of being being able to receive that, and now to teach and share that. That, to me, it's like the divine is shining and smiling source is shining and smiling here with us and everyone listening, because it is your soul's purpose, and it is here to heal everyone. Everyone can really be impacted by the possibility, by who we really are. I'm just so grateful for you. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably, so courageously. It is such an honor. I don't take this lightly, as you know. And this is truly what we talk about here about being your Youest you, is what you just shared, is who we really are, is not the body, is not what we think. It is everlasting love, is what I really heard you say.
Indeed. And what a gift of a wake-up call this has all been. And I'm so excited to see what is next in, you know, on my path, on my husband's path, on our path together, because it's really truly opened up a whole new world of being and existing and understandings of near-death experiences, and then understandings of what I've just recently learned about shared death experiences and how those can profoundly change your life and your trajectory forward. So I'm really looking forward to flowing into whatever the universe has in store.
Yes. And so it is.
And so it is.
Thank you. Thank you, my beautiful, dear friend and courageous, wise woman. And I want to thank all of you, our listeners near and far, for being here, for holding this sacred space, for Danette, for sharing her very powerful, courageous story and what's possible with the divine, of healing, of miracles. And please remember that you are always loved and of love. And perhaps you'll get to join us at the Illuminate Film Festival, which is life-changing, obviously, clearly, as demonstrated. Life-changing. Thank you. And I love you, Danette.
I love you too. I love you all out there, and may your path be blessed.
Yes. Love and light to each of you.